Three fugitives burst into the dusty DTIC Exelon Saloon, looking for easy prey. Instead, they found themselves face to face with the deadliest gunslinger the Western Territories had ever known. What followed would expose a vast railroad conspiracy, topple a corrupt territorial governor, and dismantle one of the largest land-grabbing schemes in U.S. history. They thought they were intimidating a simple saloon girl. In reality, they challenged Emma de Torme, the legendary dark rider who had outdueled 47 of the deadliest gunslingers across 5 territories. Sometimes the most dangerous predator is the one serving you whiskey before returning to the story. Tell us where you're following us from. If this story touches your heart, make sure to subscribe because tomorrow I have something very special prepared for you. Thunder rumbled across the New Mexico territory as Emma Torme polished the glasses behind the worn bar of the Dusty Creek Exelon. Her movements were precise and economical, habits formed after years of ensuring nothing hindered the quick draw that had made her famous in another life. The afternoon crowd was sparse, probably due to the approaching storm. A few regulars were hunched over their cards in the corner, while old Thomas played a soft melody on the saloon's battered piano. Through the grimy windows, Emma watched Marshall Wilson making his evening rounds, carefully avoiding eye contact with the saloon. Another sign that something wasn't right in town. She had been there for 3 months, observing, waiting, gathering information about the strange events in Dusty Creek. Ranchers being forced off their lands, mysterious fires on farms that refused to sell, and a railroad survey team that seemed more interested in intimidation than understanding routes. Rosa Martinez emerged from the kitchen, drying her hands on her apron. The cook had become Emma's closest ally in town, her eyes and ears among the Mexican workers who saw everything, but were rarely noticed by the powerful who planned Dusty Creek's future. "More riders are coming," Rosa whispered in Spanish, a language few knew Emma was fluent in after years of tracking fugitives across the frontier territories. "Black hats, expensive horses, the Iron Brigade by the look of their gear," Emma replied, pausing her polishing. Her keen ears caught the sound of approaching hoofbeats. The Iron Brigade, hired guns disguised as railroad security, had been appearing more frequently, testing limits and pressuring businesses. Their reputation for cruelty had cleared their path across 3 territories, leaving shattered lives and stolen lands in their wake. Most only whispered about them, but Emma had crossed paths with their kind before. The saloon's swinging doors burst open as 3 men entered, their spurs clinking against a wooden floor. Emma recognized the leader immediately. James McGraw, a former Confederate cavalry officer turned hired gun. His distinctive snakeskin belt, marked with notches representing each man sent to an early grave, was unmistakable. Behind him, his lieutenants fanned out with practiced precision. Wolf Carson covered the rear door, while Quick Murphy headed toward the stairs, cutting off any escape route. "Good afternoon, miss," McGraw drawled, sliding onto a bar stool with calculated grace. His smile never reached his cold eyes as he surveyed the saloon. "I've been told this place serves the best whiskey in the territory." Emma set down her cleaning cloth, keeping her movements casual despite the tension buzzing through her body. "We serve whiskey," she replied calmly. "Whether it's the best depends on the taste of the one drinking it." Murphy chuckled, moving closer to examine the collection of antique weapons mounted on the wall. Pieces Emma had carefully selected to appear decorative rather than practical. His expert eye lingered too long on certain weapons, evaluating their value with professional interest. "Nice collection," he said. "From your late husband, I suppose?" "Just appreciating history." "Something like that," Emma responded, noting how his hand inched closer to his own gun, a custom Colt with distinctive ivory grips. She had heard stories about that pistol, about how quickly it could appear in Murphy's hand when trouble started. But she had seen faster. She had been faster. Rosa appeared in the kitchen doorway, her dark eyes meeting Emma's briefly. A silent warning passed between them. They had witnessed this pattern before in other towns. First the polite visits, then the suggestions, and finally the threats, all part of a carefully orchestrated campaign to convince locals that selling their land to the railroad was in their best interest. "Speaking of history," McGraw continued, his voice laced with a dangerous edge that Emma recognized from the wanted posters that once adorned Marshall's offices across the West. Colonel Harrison mentioned you acquired this place just months ago, following the unfortunate accident that befell old Jack Miller. Emma kept her expression neutral, though her mind raced. The Colonel, Charles Chuck Harrison, head of railroad security, had been asking questions about her past. The Colonel seems well informed about local business affairs, she said. He has an interest, McGraw replied, tracing a finger along his snakeskin belt. A man in his position wants to know who's in a growing town like Dusty Creek. The Colonel is thorough, Emma conceded, placing a glass of water in front of McGraw without being asked, a subtle reminder that she had been reading People long before he crossed her threshold. The crash of Murphy deliberately knocking over a chair resonated through the room. Emma didn't flinch, her eyes tracking every movement, noting positions, angles, distances, information that had once meant the difference between life and death in a dozen frontier towns. Quiet can be overrated, McGraw said, his friendly facade slipping slightly. The town is changing, growing. Smart business owners know when to adapt, when to accept new partnership opportunities. I prefer to keep things simple, Emma said, holding his gaze steadily. Just me, my saloon, and my regular customers. You might want to reconsider that stance, McGraw said, standing up and placing a business card on the bar. The railroad company's logo was prominently displayed alongside a handwritten number. In small towns, things happen. Fires, accidents, troublemakers causing problems. It's good to have friends watching your back. Is that what happened to the Martinez Ranch? Rosa asked from the kitchen doorway. McGraw's expression hardened. A tragic situation. They should have had better insurance. Emma picked up the card, noting the elaborate letterhead and the Colonel's personal seal. I'll keep it in mind. See that you do, McGraw said, signaling his men. We'll see you soon, Miss Tormey. Very soon. After they left, Rosa locked the door and turned the sign to close. They moved with the synchronization of people who had done this before, ensuring their daily act had fooled another group of predators. They're getting bolder, Rosa said in Spanish, watching the Iron Brigade riders disappear into the gathering storm. First the Martinez Ranch, then Miller's place, and now they're here. They're too organized, too methodical for simple intimidation, Emma replied, studying McGraw's card. Her mind was already connecting pieces of a larger puzzle. The Iron Brigade's movements suggested precision, their territorial expansion too well planned. Each piece of land they had taken formed a pattern she had seen before, one that spoke of something much bigger than a simple land grab for the railroad. Send a message to Miguel, she told Rosa. Tell him to watch the old silver mine tonight. Something tells me our new friends aren't just running a protection racket. Rosa nodded, understanding the implications. Miguel was one of Emma's old contacts, a former Texas Ranger who now worked as a private investigator. If the Iron Brigade was up to something bigger, they would need evidence. Emma headed to the back office, retrieving a locked box she hadn't opened in months. Inside were the tools of her former trade, a pair of custom Colts with barrels cut for a faster draw, their blue steel immaculate despite dozens of shootouts they had witnessed. 3 years of silent observation were about to end as she checked her guns with practiced efficiency. She thought about Murphy's interest in the mounted weapons, McGraw's military tactics, and Colonel Harrison's sudden curiosity about her past. The pieces were there, forming an image she had seen before in other towns. But this time, she had the advantage. They thought they were dealing with a simple saloon girl, unaware that Emma de Tormey had spent 10 years as the most feared gunslinger in 5 territories. Thunder approached as Emma loaded her revolvers, each movement smooth and precise. Sometimes, she reflected, the most dangerous predator isn't the one wearing a snakeskin belt or flaunting an ivory-handled Colt. Sometimes it's the one hiding in plain sight, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The storm broke over Dusty Creek with biblical fury, rain pounding the saloon's tin roof like 1,000 angry fists. Emma went through her nightly closing routine with practiced efficiency, her mind analyzing the implications of the Iron Brigade's visit. Through the rain-streaked windows, occasional lightning flashes illuminated the town's main street, now deserted save for a hurried figure seeking shelter. The walls of the DTIC Creek Exelon held their own stories, told in the worn wood, and faded photographs that decorated the space. Emma had chosen each image carefully when she took over the place. Scenes from the Old West, iconic to reinforce a facade as a simple woman trying to preserve a piece of history. But like everything related to Emma Torme, there were layers of truth hidden beneath the obvious. "They'll be back tomorrow," Rosa said, emerging from the kitchen with a coffee pot. The older woman's face bore the wise, weathered look of someone who had seen too many small towns fall to powerful interests. "Harrison never makes just one visit," Emma agreed, accepting a cup of strong brew. "Tell me about Colonel Harrison. Everything you've heard, everything people whisper when they think no one is listening." Rosa settled into a chair, her dark eyes distant with memory. 6 months ago, with the railroad survey team. Perfect manners, expensive suits, always talking about progress and opportunities. But there was something more, something in the way he watched people, like a cat studying mice. When did the accident start? 3 weeks after he arrived, Rosa continued. First, it was small things, broken fences, scattered livestock. Then the fires started on the farms that refused to sell. Marshal Wilson investigated, of course, but somehow never found anything suspicious. Emma's fingers traced the grain of the bar counter, feeling the hidden stories in its worn surface. And the Eye Brigade appeared a month ago? At first, they said they were just providing security for the railroad, protecting the survey teams, Rosa explained. But then, people started disappearing. Miguel's brother, Vicente, saw something he shouldn't have near the silver mine. The next day, he was gone, left a half-eaten breakfast on his table, and never returned. Lightning flashed again, and Emma caught a reflection in the mirror behind the bar. For a moment, she saw herself as she'd been before. Younger, harder, the legendary Dark Rider who had brought justice to a lawless frontier. She had earned that name in a shootout in Dodge City, taking down 3 of the notorious Clayton brothers before the 4th could even draw. The memory brought others with it. 10 years tracking the worst the territories had to offer, bringing them to justice one bullet at a time. She had developed a reputation for never failing, never losing her quarry, never backing down from a fight. But that reputation had come at a cost, one she had paid in blood and loss until she finally walked away. A knock at the back door interrupted her thoughts. Rosa tensed, but Emma recognized the pattern. 3 quick knocks, a pause, and 2 more. It was Miguel's signal. She opened the door to find a former Texas Ranger dripping on her back stoop, his serape soaked by the rain. "You were right," he said without preamble, stepping inside and removing his hat. Water cascaded from the brim. "Something's happening at the silver mine. Wagons coming and going all night. Men with military rifles standing guard." Emma poured him a coffee, noting how his hands instinctively moved toward the pistol at his side, a habit shared by those who had lived too long with danger. "Tell me about the wagons," she said. "They look like army surplus, but with fresh paint covering any markings," Miguel explained. "They're moving something heavy. Takes 4 horses to pull each one. And here's the strange part. They're not following the main road. They're using old Indian trails, keeping to the shadows like they're hiding something." Rosa added, placing a plate of food in front of Miguel. "But hiding what?" Emma's mind worked through the possibilities, connecting pieces of a puzzle she had seen before in other territories. The railroad survey team wasn't just mapping train routes, she realized. "They're not just mapping train routes, are they, Miguel?" she asked. Miguel shook his head. "They've been spending more time taking soil samples than measuring grades. And they're very interested in certain parcels of land, the ones that just happen to keep having accidents until the owner sells." Emma approached the window, watching as lightning illuminated the hills where the silver mine lay hidden. Even now, Harrison's men were quietly stealing the territory's future. She thought about the practiced hand of Murphy with the ivory-handled Colt, McGraw's cinching appeal to Serpiente with his death notches, and the growing sense of danger that hung over Dusty Creek like a shroud. "First, we gather evidence, names, dates, proof that can't be buried in territorial politics," she said finally. Her hand brushed against a concealed holster where her own Colt rested. "Then we remind the Iron Brigade why they used to call me the Dark Rider. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time," Emma said, turning back to the camera. "So, if you're enjoying it, make sure to subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us." Now, let's get back to the story. The dawn painted the New Mexico sky in hues of amber and gold as Emma stood at the back door of the saloon, watching the town slowly come to life. The storm had passed, leaving puddles that reflected the morning light like scattered mirrors. A trained eye caught details others might miss. Fresh hoofprints circling the building, expensive cigarette butt near the trough, signs that the Iron Brigade had been watching during the night. The sound of approaching horses drew her attention. Through the morning mist, she spotted Marshal Wilson, riding alongside none other than Colonel Harrison himself. The colonel cut imposing figure on his black stallion, his military bearing evident even in civilian clothes. His gray hair and neatly trimmed mustache projected an image of distinguished authority, but Emma noted how his right hand never strayed far from his holstered revolver. "Looks like they're making their morning rounds early," Rose observed, appearing at Emma's shoulder. "Harrison usually waits until after breakfast to start his visits of intimidation," Emma replied softly, watching the pair dismount in front of the saloon. The swinging doors creaked as Harrison and Wilson entered, their spurs clinking against the wooden floor. Emma had already moved behind the bar, assuming the role of simple saloon owner with practiced ease. She kept her movements unhurried as she wiped down the already clean counter. "Miss Tormay," Harrison's voice carried the cultivated tones of an Eastern education. "I trust you had an enlightening conversation with Mr. McGraw last night." Emma noted how Marshal Wilson positioned himself near the door, his discomfort evident in his rigid stance. The man's badge might represent the law, but it was clear who truly held authority in Dusty Creek. "Mr. McGraw was quite persuasive in his suggestions about business partnerships," Emma replied, her tone carefully neutral. "Progress requires cooperation, Miss Tormay," Harrison said, though the statement didn't reach his eyes. "The railroad brings opportunities that will transform this territory. Smart business owners understand the importance of being on the right side of history and the wrong side. And what happens to those on the wrong side?" Emma asked, noting how Wilson flinched at her direct question. "Progress can be hard for those who resist it," Harrison said, his gaze sharpening. "But I'm sure a smart woman like you understands the benefits of cooperation." Emma met his stare steadily. "I understand the benefits of staying out of other people's business, Colonel. I run my saloon, serve my customers, and mind my own affairs." Harrison studied her for a moment before continuing. "I admire your independence, Miss Tormay, but sometimes independence can be misinterpreted, especially by those who don't understand complexities of progress." "Is that a threat, Colonel?" Emma asked calmly. Harrison smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Merely an observation, Miss Tormay. These are complex times, and complex times require complex solutions. I hope you'll consider the benefits of aligning yourself with the future of this territory." "I'll consider it," Emma said, her voice steady. "But for now, I have a saloon to run." Harrison nodded, his smile never wavering. "Of course. But remember, Miss Tormay, the future waits for no one, and those who resist progress often find themselves left behind." With that, Harrison and Wilson turned and left the saloon, their spurs clinking against the wooden floor. Emma watched them go, her mind racing. Harrison's visit had been a clear warning. Cooperate or face the consequences. But Emma Day Tormay wasn't one to back down from a fight, especially not when the future of Dusty Creek was at stake. As the day wore on, Emma went about her usual tasks, but her mind was elsewhere. She thought about the Iron Brigade, about the railroad's true intentions, and about the people of Dusty Creek, who were caught in the middle. She knew she had to act, but she also knew she couldn't do it alone. She needed allies, people who understood the stakes and were willing to fight for what was right. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Emma made her decision. She would gather her allies, formulate a plan, and take the fight to Harrison and the Iron Brigade. She would remind them why they used to call her the Dark Rider, and show them that some legends were better left undisturbed.